Tonight our resolution is resolved. Address homelessness with housing first without preconditions. With that, I call this debate to order. And I'm looking for a speech in the affirmative. Our first affirmative speaker is going to be Abby Arnold. Abby, are you ready to speak? You have 4 minutes.
I'm ready. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm Abby and I live in Santa Monica, California. There used to be a comedian, I guess.
Abby, you're muted. There you go.
Okay. Hi, I'm Abby and I live in Santa Monica, California. There was a comedian who used to call this the home of the homeless. He broadcast from Santa Monica. We're at the end of Interstate 10, which goes across the whole country. And we have incredibly mild winters. It's maybe 68, 70 degrees here today, and it's about the same during the summer. So if you're living outdoors, where else would you want to be other than here? And so I've had lots of opportunities to interact with unhoused people over the years. And I've learned that the housing first theory is based on, it's a national policy based on a social work theory from the 1960s called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the idea is that you take care of people's most important needs first before you can get to the more intimate needs that they have, or the more important, what you might think is the most important. And as we all know, many of the people who are living outdoors may be suffering with mental illness and some physical illnesses, and they may be treating their mental illness with various self-medications, drugs and alcohol, legal or illegal. But they do have rights, basic human rights, and they have self-determination. And so Housing First says take care of their basic need for, a place to go to the bathroom, a roof over their heads, and a reasonable amount of food, so that then you can get at the other needs. And what has been found from using this system, getting people inside first, is that then it makes it easier to get them to services because you can find them. They're not going to lose their phone. They're not going to lose their ID again because they've got a place to live. So it makes practical sense as well. And they asked me to tell a story, and I thought I would tell the story about a friend of mine who I will call Ben, and I think of him as kind of my secret shopper in the homeless services world. He was a very popular community activist in the neighborhood that he grew up in. But as he got into adulthood, he was still living with his mom, and he was drinking and smoking a lot of pot and not able to hold a job. And that was clearly related to him self-medicating for whatever was going on in his head. And then when his mom died, his brother sold the house out from under him. And so he started living in his van. And then when he lost his van, camping out in the backyards of places in deserted houses or friendly people in his neighborhood. One of the reasons he liked being in this neighborhood was that there was a place where he could go and get his hair cut and shave. So he always looked really presentable, and that was important to him. And finally, when things kind of deteriorated enough, I helped him get into a Housing First program. And it wasn't easy, but once he got in and got into housing, he got his pain medications managed. He started showing up at his clinic appointments. He got surgery that he needed. All those things started happening for him. And he now he got on disability, and now he lives in a building with other disabled people. And he has a really, a nice life. It's very basic, but he has a nice life. And there's a social worker there 40 hours a week who makes sure that everybody gets to their medical appointments and doesn't spend all their money on beer, and that they, take out their trash and get fed and have a social life and play cards together, watch football games together. And they have a really, a very nice but basic level life.
Thank you.
So,
Abby, can you wrap up in just one sentence there? That's our time.
yeah. So I just wanted to share his story with you all, that it really means something to real people. Thanks.
Thank you. Hands for our speaker. This is a great way that you can show appreciation that you've heard. And you can use this anytime during the debate to just show your thankfulness for people that are getting out there and sharing their perspective. All right, we'll receive a couple of questions. You can use your Zoom hand, your electronic hand, which will put your that'll put your name up at the top of my list if you have a question for our speaker. And we'll just ask you to address the question to me, Madam Chair, and make it a nice, concise question if there's something you would like to know. All right, Paul?
Yes, Madam Chair. I would like to ask the speaker, how does maintenance for the housing take place? What are the provisions for that?
Thank you. 1 minute to answer. Abby, unmute.
So, I'm sorry, I don't understand the maintenance. The building is owned by a nonprofit organization, and so they make sure that the outside gets taken care of and that the service coordinator is there during the week. And so they're there. It's a, you know, there's services included with the housing that he lives in. I hope that answered it.
Thank you. Is there another question? I'm going to go to Joe Geiger. You can unmute and ask your question to me, Madam Chair.
Yes, Madam Chair. I was wondering if at that home they have rules and regulations which the people have to adhere to be there.
Thank you for the question. They have limited rules that the people who move in agree to. They have to pay a little bit of money toward the rent, and they have to, you know, be quiet and be respectful of their neighbors. But a lot of that is worked out through a group council where all the people who live there get together and agree on the rules.
All right, thank you. With 2 questions, we're going to just move on. So with that, the speaker is thanked. All right, hands for our speaker. Our second speaker is speaking against the resolution, and that is Cynthia King. Cynthia, you have 4 minutes. I am looking for Cynthia.
I have it.
There you are. Yeah,
yes,
go ahead.
I was muted, sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was an economist for the Department of HUD for 6 years, followed by 15 years, originating, developing, and financing affordable housing in historic buildings in rural areas. I learned much from professional managers. I've been a tenant, a landlord, taking a Section 8 voucher, and I was actually born in a government housing project, so I speak from my experience. The phrase without preconditions means we're not talking about people whose primary difficulty in getting housing is money. We're talking about people who, absent preconditions, wouldn't be accepted in most housing. We see homeless people on the street and want to help. It makes us feel good, and it stops the anguish of seeing them. But if we do something that feels good but moves the problem down the line to become a problem for someone else, that's not kindness, it's convenient. Kindness can't be blind to the consequences created for others. When government or private housing is rented, people applying are screened to see that they'll be good neighbors. In affordable housing, when the project isn't working, when it's, you know, the dangerous thing everybody's afraid of, people do what I call blaming the bricks. The bricks made the building dangerous, so tear it down and build something new. A lot of businesses love this idea because the banker, the bond issuer, the developer, many other people get a big payday when the new building opens. But the problem was never the bricks. The problem was management, including kind but blind, unrealistic rules placed on management, stopping them from removing drug dealers, predators, and those who enable them. When 2 competing goals can't be achieved in the same place and time, There has to be a choice. We can't provide safe, clean, sanitary, non-chaotic housing for people who are low income if we fill those buildings with people who can't control their behavior. If management allows people who are criminal or engage in drug and alcohol behavior or unable to manage their mental health issues in the same family with buildings just trying to get their kids to school and old people trying to live their lives in peace, the peace and order will be denied to those others. It happens now. This will make it worse. Once someone moves into a drug and alcohol with a drug alcohol predatory situation and no preconditions are required, how long will they be allowed to stay? There's no requirement. 60 days, 90 days. What if they relapse again and again? What happens to their neighbors? I predict they'll be allowed to stay. And very quickly, the neighbors who were benefiting from the very expensive to build affordable housing, who wanted to improve the future for their families, they will move out and look for safer, more expensive places to live. Eventually, the buildings intended to help families or seniors have a better life, those buildings become another Uzi Alley, another awful dangerous place, dangerous to the very people they were built for. I just talked faster than I thought. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much. Now we'll take a couple of questions, and I'll start with Eric Zimmerman. You can unmute and ask your question to me, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious if the speaker knows of any research from a country or countries in Europe that shows that housing first does in fact address is the most effective way to spend money to improve the situation.
Okay, 1 minute to answer.
There is a huge difference between a small study that is closely monitored, has social workers watching every day and trying things out, versus making this a policy for housing all across the country. The lady who spoke first, when I heard that, I heard that the final result was to be in a very small and organized place. We're not talking about sweeping people off the streets and dumping them into every government housing or private housing against the wills of the people who live there already.
Thank you. Just going in order of the people who raised their hands, Barb, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I would like to ask the speaker if this type of behavior happens in housing for people that aren't low income or aren't homeless.
Only if they own it. No, you can be evicted from an apartment. Yes, there is bad behavior sometimes. Sometimes the management is poor or lazy, or sometimes the management has such a long process required to evict people that by the time they evict the person who is, and I have seen, leaving broken glass in their front yard, doing other inappropriate things, they have already caused all the people who live nearby to start looking for another place.
Thank you.
So yes, it happens with people who are not homeless, and then they become homeless sometimes.
Thank you. Because this speaker has spoken under time and there are a lot of questions, I'm going to take one more question, and that's from Sheldon Smith. Sheldon, you can unmute and ask your question.
Okay, so really good discussion, first of all. One of the things that comes to mind with me, and I would like your opinion on this, is do you feel like if residents in housing facilities don't have any involvement or any skin in the game, so to speak, with their housing situation, do you feel like it would benefit them in the long run? And does this cause some of the problems with residents in long-term housing situations?
Okay, 1 minute to answer.
I'm not sure if you're talking about Can he explain the question? Because I don't know if you're talking about some sort of transitional housing for the homeless, which by the way, I have built one. Or are you talking about just sort of general apartment buildings where people all either pay rent or have a voucher to live there?
Sheldon, go ahead and clarify, but use the third person to talk to me about what she would believe, and that would be helpful. Thanks.
Sure. Okay. Yes. So the first thing that comes to mind, a lot of the shelters I see are high capacity types, but this could also apply to down the road. If residents have more responsibilities and involvements in their housing situation, do you believe that would lead to better outcomes? Does that make sense?
I think so. My understanding is we're talking about, again, transitional housing or some sort of group situation. And absolutely, it's a good idea for people to be involved. People, they may not technically have skin in the game in terms of money, but they're helping to make the rules. And that always helps people to be more cooperative and once they've set the standards, they're going to care about those standards more. That happens everywhere.
Thank you very much. And with that, the speaker is thanked. All right, good work, everybody. We're going to have a speech in the affirmative now from Spencer Veal. Spencer, are you with us? You have 4 minutes.
Yes, I am. Let me just set the clock here. Sorry, anyway, you'll tell me when I'm out of time. So my kind of like basic premise is if we have the capacity to provide housing to all without causing significant collateral damage that would somehow outweigh the benefits of doing that, then we should do it. And so this, kind of like the basic advantages are, improved morale. I think it's demoralizing to see homeless people on the streets. Their suffering is kind of like it brings us all down, and I think it makes public spaces more dangerous. But we all live with the sense of economic insecurity of knowing that kind of like there, but for the grace of God, go I. And so I think that I consider this kind of like a moral blight on the soul of America that we allow people to be homeless that would like to have housing. And so I'm not going to get into too much, but I believe that we do have the capacity to provide housing to all. Federally funded housing guarantee. I know public housing has a bad reputation, but I like to set up a contrast between public housing and social housing. I say the difference is social housing is public housing that is funded, designed, and maintained to succeed. And there's lots of examples of successful social housing. And so my last point that I'll talk about is kind of a response to one of the other speakers, which is, if there's problems with criminality, I mean, people can go to prison, right? But for the issue of, just people who are not really cooperative, are causing problems in the building or are refuse to kind of like get a job and stuff like that. I do think it is reasonable to, separate uncooperative cases from other units and families that are cooperative, so that it does not become a blight for more cooperative tenants and families. And and I think for people that am I coming up on time? For people who kind of like refuse to get a job or are deeply dysfunctional and like have trouble participating in society, I think for those people you give them mental health services, you give them a caseworker, and hopefully you can nurse them to health to where they can participate in society in a constructive way. And for the ones that don't, I think you give them the bare minimum, and even if they never get their lives together and manage to participate in society, I still think it is preferable to give them the basics of a dignified life. And I think we do have that ability.
Thank you. Hands for our speaker. I'll take a question from Kevin Dahlgren. Kevin, you can unmute and ask your question to me.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I absolutely agree with Spencer that we have the ability to build housing for all, but the challenge is getting everyone to accept that housing. I've done this for 25 years, and I will say, if we were to build housing for everyone in the United States, maybe 60% of the people would accept it.
So what's your question, or do you want to make a speech?
The biggest challenge I've had is getting people to accept the housing. So my question is, what do we do with individuals that have denied all, refused all help and been more service resistant? Now, we all know it's just keep trying over and over again, but housing all doesn't always work if everyone continues to deny the housing. So the question is, what do we do with that population?
Thank you. 1 minute.
Yeah, I'm not somebody who, you know, who would coerce people to accept public housing. I think if people don't want it, then that's their choice. I think the priority is to make it available to those who want it.
Thank you. A question from Carl Hoffman. You can unmute and ask your question. There you go.
Okay. All right. Now, here we go. I was a pastor of a church, and we had homeless people come by all the time. And during the time I was there, we had probably about 1,800 of them coming by wanting something. And so what we did is that we gave them, we wanted to protect their ego, so we gave them a choice. And we had 3 choices. And they related to gift cards, a meal at McDonald's, or a bus pass.
And
Here's
what's your
situation?
question?
Here's a situation. Here's my question. We had a guy show up one day. He had a roll of $100 bills in his hand that he showed me. And all he wanted to do was to sleep in our parking lot. And I said to him, well, there is places where you can go. He wasn't interested. He wanted to sleep in our parking lot.
So what's your question, please?
My question is, what do we do with people who won't accept the housing available? They don't accept anything, and they do have the resources to not even be homeless. What do we do with those people?
Spencer, 1 minute.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't, I would say the important thing is that housing and mental health services and employment, et cetera, are available to them. If they do not want to accept it, I think that's on them. And I think the important thing is just that these things be available to them.
Then you can't solve the problem.
Thank you. And with that,
I'm saying that the problem is that they don't have access. If they have access, then that's as far as I'm interested. Concerned about.
Thank you. Our conversation will continue, and with that, the speaker is thanked. We're keeping a very tight rein on our conversation, and if you would like to make a speech, be sure to send a chat to your whip. We're going to a speech in the negative, and that is from Kathy Weiss. Kathy, you can unmute, and you have 4 minutes.
Hi, my name is Kathy Weiss, and I am the founder of a shelter for homeless families in Gresham, Oregon. It's a little bit different working with families than it is working with individuals off the street, and I understand that. We have a housing for 40 families right now at the shelter and our transitional housing project. My biggest concern is that when you have housing first, there is a lot of things that we're leaving left undone. In my experience, when you have families that have really no other option but to go into a shelter, having those conditions help them become better people all the way around. So we are a back to work program. we have people that come to us and they have no idea how to even support their families. And they might be young individuals that have lived on the street or, you know, couch hopped from friend to friend, and they don't understand what they need to learn in order to be self-sufficient. And we want to help them become self-sufficient. And if we were just to give them a place to live without any other help, I can't imagine how horrible our success rate would be. Right now, we have an 85% success rate in families finding housing and affordable housing and sustainable jobs. In point, I had a gal, 26 years old, with a 10-year-old daughter, and Misty came to us, and she lived on welfare her whole life, and she went from excuse me, from family member to family member, from friend to friends, couch surfing, doing whatever she could, but never had her own place. She had never had a job. She's always lived on welfare. And it was like, well, what are you going to do? Well, how are you going to make your family work if you're not going to be willing to learn the skills that you need? It took us 9 months to help Misty find a job because she kept sabotaging it. She didn't know what to do. But as soon as Misty got that job, the incredible thing was that she came back and she said, I can't believe it. I've only worked 1 day. And she said, why didn't anyone ever tell me? It was so much fun to have a job. She loved it. She felt good about herself. She did not feel like she was sponging off society. We want to give them that dignity and that pride in being someone that they can be. And the only way you can do that is to help them discover what life can bring, not just the hardships, but the joys as well. I wanted to tell you this quote from Stephen Covey because I just really resonated with me. He's an author, and he wrote, treat a man as he is, and he will remain as he is. Treat a man as he can and should be, and he will become what he can and should be. And for me, when I look at the families that come through our program and they're changing and growing, I mean, why wouldn't we want everyone to be all that they can be? And they can't be that by sticking them in housing and saying, there you go, everything's free, have a good time. It's not responsible to our own humanity to do that to people. So in my experience, helping people become self-sufficient and having the pride and the dignity that goes along with that is well worth the time and effort it takes to make that happen for them.
Thank you. All right, we'll have a question from Carol. Carol, you can unmute and ask your question to me.
So, Madam Chair, I would like to ask the speaker how she has gone about or recommends going about figuring out what should come first, if not housing. She told a compelling story. I'd like to know in general, how do you think through that stuff?
Okay, Kathy.
Well, I think that everyone has issues. Doesn't matter if it's mental health or physical conditions, but having expectations of what is required of them to be part of a group of a society, I think that is all we do is we sit down with them. What are your expectations? What do you think that you need to get you to be self-sustaining? And they have answers for you. They'll tell you, and sometimes it's ridiculous. And then we will talk about goals. What kind of goals do you have? And they'll say, well, I want my own home. Excuse me. I want my own home, my own house. And it's like, that's great if you want your own house, but let's start with square one. Let's get a job so you can afford that house. And I think that, you know, it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse. They need to learn some skills before they're able to manage their own money or manage a job and manage things to get them into a place where they can actually afford a home and be able to be a self-supporting citizen.
Thank you. Another question from Leslie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would like to ask the speaker where this family lived for the 9 months before they were able to come back with a job, and where in general do families go when they have they're not yet able to meet your conditions, because having your children homeless is quite a terrible thing to witness.
Yeah, Kathy.
Well, she was living at the shelter, and our shelter is a 6-month program. It's an educational program and back to work. So we give grace, of course. And so when her 6 months was up, she wasn't ready. And so we said, okay, she's not ready. What do we do to help her get ready? Started helping her with her interview skills for a job, started using some other techniques to get her to a place where she would have more confidence. But she took 9 months, which is unusual. However, we didn't throw her out on the street. She was in the shelter making progress. So
thank you. And with that, our speaker is thanked. Hands for our speaker. Moving to a speech in the affirmative from Miguel Carrera. Miguel, you can unmute and you have 4 minutes. Here he comes.
Great. So yes. Okay. My name is Miguel Carrera. So I'm working for the Coalition on Homelessness in San Francisco. Yeah, so I want to say why is so important housing first, and I hear a couple of the stories of you guys, or the presenters was saying and speaking, and it's yeah. So I've been working in the Coalition on Homelessness for over 27 years. I am formerly homeless. I was in the streets. I was so many times criminalized and abused from the police. And yeah, so before I get out from there. So, and yeah, the Coalition on Homelessness gave to me an opportunity to start working there 7 years volunteer without payment. And as they were so grateful because I have an opportunity to learning how to organizing, how to advocate, how to defending the homeless people who is outside in the streets or in the shelters or anywhere where they congregate. So for over these 27 years, I want to mention in 2003, for example, in 2003, we was organizing around 300 homeless families and the projects. And that time, in that days, there was the calling projects from Housing Authority. So we take over these 300 units and we let another city to fix and rebuild. And we moved the 300 families to permanent housing. So families never say no when it's coming to housing. Of course, everyone moved to housing. 80%, 85% of these families was African Americans. All these families are in housing and they're still living there. So this is an amazing thing. So in 2005, so we started working, putting together different tools. And yes, I accepted to come to speaking because we was create the first housing first, and we calling housing first for families. So we demanding the city to providing to create rent subsidies for families, and we demanding 120 subsidies, and the mayor give it to us 300 for the families. So in 1-2 years, we moved a bunch of families to permanent housing. So this is for that side. So in 2016, 2017, we started working again to bringing all the data, all the resources, all the recommendations that we collecting from different community meetings, popular assemblies, outreaches. So outside in the streets and the shelters and everywhere where the people congregate. And we decided to create the Proposition C. And the Proposition C, which means is to charging 0.5 0.5% to the rich people, and we won. We won. So, and then the money they generate from this proposition is about more than 340 millions every year, and that's forever, this money. So anyway, so the purpose of doing this campaign is trying to see we can solve the problem. We can end the homelessness if we really put real attention to the issues. The other issue I want to mention in this.
We're out of time now, but we're going to go to questions. So just hold your thought, and we will receive a question. I'm going to call on people that haven't asked a question yet first. So Ms. Pumpernickel, I'm going to call on you to ask your question and ask it to me.
Okay.
Unmute.
Hi.
My question is, what does the last speaker, Miguel Carrera, think about the situation that I heard of in New York, where they built, I guess, a lot of housing, but so much of it is not being occupied because there's so much crime within the housing. Has he heard of that? And does he have an opinion about what could be done for the many homeless in New York who are evidently afraid to live in the housing which has been spent for and taken care of the way I understood it? I'm not sure because I'm not from New York.
Yeah, Miguel, you have 1 minute.
Yes. So issues we want to facing everywhere when we developing housing. You can buy a house, or you can buy a house in any place, and we want to see in these kind of issues. So problems is everywhere. So and when we're talking about homeless people is no criminal, really is not. Homeless people suffer some kind of type of trauma, some kind of type of issues, and I think so. To solving these problems is education. To have some kind of type of community meetings all together and talking about issues and finding solution about these issues. But it's possible to happen. So like I was saying earlier, what happened in these projects that we won 300 housing units. So yeah.
Thank you. Okay,
it's possible
good.
to solve this problem.
And second question from Linda. You can unmute and ask your question. Linda, there you go.
Okay, there you go. Yes, Madam Speaker, my question is, in the example that Miguel was giving of the situation that worked well and housed a bunch of families, I was just wondering if there were any preconditions in that situation.
All right, 1 minute to answer.
No. So, yeah, so when it's coming to homeless people, we cannot put rules. We cannot put preconditions to people. We need to give you the opportunity to people to be part of the decisions. We need to allow people to decide and being part to the agreements. I don't call rules. I don't like rules to put into people homeless. So it's agreements. If we agree together, we sit down together and we have an open discussion, we can solve the problems. But I know the precondition is not working for no one, including myself.
So I just wanted to clarify, Madam Speaker. So the families that were given the housing, you simply knew these people were unhoused.
He knew these people
and said, here's your house, or they applied, or there was just.
Yes.
Okay.
But we have a meetings together. We have a meetings together before they take the housing, go to the process to apply and get the housing. So yeah.
Thank you. And with that, the speaker is thanked. All right, hands for our speaker. Next up, Deborah Morrison. Deborah, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am going to speak to believing that preconditions are necessary. But when I say that, I'm kind of going to flip the tables, because I don't mean for homeless people themselves. I mean primarily for those of us who are housed, and for homeowners in particular, of which I'm one. So I'm talking to myself here. My position is that in our society, we can't have constantly rising home values and accompanying astronomical rent increases, and also expect that everyone will be able to be adequately housed. We can't demand speculator-style returns when we sell our home, which seems to be increasingly the expectation, at least in my part of the country. I live in Seattle. Equally importantly, we can't expect to be able to insulate ourselves from the people in our community that have less economic security than we do, or have mental health problems that maybe we don't. We need to be able to live in a smaller footprint with denser housing in mixed income neighborhoods that encourage the diversity of housing stock, so we can meet the variety of needs that people have. We need to advocate for policies that loosen or eliminate zoning, discourage speculation, and incentivize diverse housing ecosystems like accessory dwelling units or detached accessory dwelling units or duplexes, small and large apartment buildings, and shared housing that are mixed in with single family homes. We need to overcome the NIMBY attitudes that we sometimes have and integrate all kinds of housing, rather than creating or supporting economic ghettos that segregate people according to their economic means. And as homeowners and people who are housed and have jobs and have a lot of advantages, we need to support more low-cost housing with our time, our money, and our talents. It's really great to hear so many people here today who are doing just that. But we can contribute through innovative financing models like charitable investments, community land trusts, and we can create public, private, and nonprofit entities that are working together to leverage financing, services, and economies of scale to provide a variety of low-cost housing options. And don't take my word for it, I'm not an expert on this, but for more ideas, you can check out housingsolutionsnetwork.org. There are a lot of possible solutions in the larger scheme of things, and I think we need to recognize our part in creating the problem to some extent and work together to make things happen, good things happen for all of us. And I think if we don't, this problem, which was really tiny when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, is going to become even more entrenched with increasing numbers of people that are homeless, and that just multiplies the pain for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Hands for our speaker. We'll take a couple of questions. Len Breslow, you can unmute and ask your question to me.
Yes, Madam Chair, wondering if the speaker thinks that private sector, it would have a role in improving the housing situation. In other words, if there weren't the zoning regulations that we have, that maybe the private sector would create more affordable housing.
Thank you for the question. 1 minute.
Yes, I do think that the private sector has a great role to play. I think the private sector has, to some extent, created some of the problem. And I think that I've also seen private sector come forward to with a lot of great possible solutions. And I think it really takes the whole ecosystem of public, private, nonprofit in order to change our whole situation of housing, where we have different expectations, and it really is more a basic need that we all have, and we recognize it as such and don't use it as such a commodified and financialized instrument. Okay.
Thank you. And a question from David Summers. You can unmute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like the speaker to know that I agree with almost everything she said at first, but then I'm wondering if the speaker would entertain the idea that the price of housing, which I think is the cause of homelessness, the increase in homelessness, could be caused by something other than supply and demand.
Okay.
I think it's caused by a whole bunch of different things, supply and demand being one of them. I mean, in certain parts of the country, like where I live, we're just growing insanely fast, and it's really hard to keep up with, with all the people that are moving in. And I think there's a whole lot of different causes. I'm curious what, maybe this isn't the time to do that, but I'm curious what you're specifically suggesting might be another primary cause of.
Well, we can't do too much back and forth,
yeah.
but thanks for addressing that, and we'll continue the conversation. So with that, our speaker is thanked. And there are at least 11 people on deck to make speeches. So I'm going to move it back to 3-minute speeches, which will keep the conversation going. If you'd like to make a speech, please send a chat to your whip. Our next speech is going to be in the affirmative, and it's Amy Tydenberg. Amy, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Amy, and so I worked on Milwaukee County's Housing First initiative. We had 2 years to get all chronically street homeless people with a disability off the street. And my job was to place people in temporary shelters while they're waiting. So I do understand that there was a previous speaker that discussed the skills that some people might need to build that, so we don't want to enable people, but there is a huge amount of people that are not eligible to go to a shelter. When you see people sleeping on the street, you ask why they don't go there, because they have a severe mental health, cognitive issue, or they have a criminal history where they are not allowed at a shelter. They are too unpredictable or violent to be around other people. And shelters are not equipped to meet the underlying condition. A lot of these are run by volunteers and do not have anyone supervising people on staff. And so the only option besides just leaving people on the street that, honestly, before the 1980s, a lot of them probably would have been forcibly committed to a mental institution. They're not, without a stable housing where, let's say you do have schizophrenia, autism, bipolar disorder, dementia, or even just children or veterans or victims of sex trafficking, they're not going to recover from that without serious intervention. And I'm not going to be able to go to my psychiatry appointments, to stay up on my medications if I'm already delusional when I'm living under a bridge. And so the only way, just like nursing homes so I do want to clarify that Housing First isn't just building up public housing and throwing them in there. So we're putting them in an apartment, their own apartments. It could be in any building, and then we are paying for a social worker to come to set them up with services so they can recover. And even if they never recover, I understand no one wants to live next to someone who has a violent history, but do I really want someone that has a history of battery or assault or a sex offender who is not eligible for any shelters to be living under a bridge or in a park where children play, or to be living in the parking structure that I'm walking alone in at night, or like finding them sleeping on my porch? So it is not safe for the community. It is not safe for those individuals. And I can tell you, those individuals that were not able to get into housing or shelter, the consequences are serious. I have women that were sleeping in parks, that were sex trafficked or raped and beaten to death. And that is not acceptable in a first world country, that we would leave people with these issues just sleeping outside to the elements.
Thank you. We'll take a couple of questions. And I'll look for questions from people that we haven't heard from yet first. And then Cynthia, go ahead and you can ask your question to me.
Hello, Madam Chair. The speaker mentioned the fact that before the 80s, many of the mentally ill people might have been committed. I would wonder if the speaker would consider it reasonable that sometimes people need to be committed.
Okay, 1 minute, Amy.
Yes, I do think they do, but because of Chapter 51, because of so many people that have sued about being forcibly treated at this time, unless somebody wants to go after this law, Americans have the freedom to not be, unless they are imminent harm to themselves or others, that it is proven that they have attempted to kill themselves or seriously harm someone else, we cannot do that. And so unfortunately, neglecting yourself, urinating on yourself, sleeping outside, not eating is not considered to be harming yourself legally at this point. But I'm totally against finding other ways around that law.
Thank you. And a question from Karen. Karen Fink, you can unmute and ask your question to me.
Thank you. Does the speaker have data that shows that maybe the cost of providing even the type of housing that she's talking about that has quite a bit of services is lower overall than the cost to for like policing and emergency rooms and other things that people who don't have a place to live end up using?
Yes, if you go to the Housing First website, actually, I've heard it was started by Republican Mormons in Utah who realized that it was cheaper to actually pay to house homeless individuals because it costs thousands of dollars in the revolving door of ER visits, emergency services, they constantly go to mental health and alcohol and drug rehab facilities just to be re-released again and just come back again, which are never treated by being on the street, and it's just using up resources from other people. And so it is way cheaper to put someone, just pay for them to be in a house and have the services treat their underlying condition. And it also it's costing money to people loitering outside businesses, panhandling is also affecting businesses and losing money in the area and making people not want to go to areas where there are homeless individuals. So there's an economic cost to that as well.
Thank you. Did you say that Housing First was started by Republican Mormons in Utah?
Let's see. Yes, that is what I was.
I did not know that. Very cool. All right, and with that, the speaker is thanked. All right. So see, we're running a tight ship, moving along, getting a lot of perspectives. We're having a speech in the negative, and I'm going to ask Richard Poole if he would like to speak for 3 minutes. Richard?
Okay, my name is Richard Poole. My background is I've been involved in affordable housing for many years. I was zoning board, rent commission, substandard housing board, chairman of a housing authority. Now I'm in North Carolina, where I'm vice chair of the county's affordable housing advisory committee. First off, I want to be clear on definition. The email that kicked off this meeting mentioned the guy sleeping on his sister's sofa. That's not homelessness. Homelessness is sleeping on the street. It could be sleeping in a car, but not housed. And I want to be very clear about that, and that's to the point I want to discuss. Many of the items that Deborah, for example, talked about are very appropriate to dealing with issues in housing affordability. They don't really have a lot to do with homelessness, as I will get into in a bit in time. You may or may not know, but HUD does what is called point-in-time study. It is done typically around the 20th of January every year. They typically have the study printed up and released or available online as a document you can pull sometime in maybe about 6 months from now. They typically analyze it. For example, in New Jersey, there were of the 1,000 or so single males, over 96% were dealing with some form of mental illness. Of the whole intact families, the head of household, 86% had some form of mental illness. So that could have included alcoholism or drug addiction or whatever, but mental illness in its broadest definition. People have talked about deinstitutionalization. Somebody was correct. In the 1950s, there was far less of homelessness. We started deinstitutionalizing nationwide late 1950s. It was still ending early 1970s. Prior to that, if somebody was caught homeless, they would be arrested, picked up, and institutionalized. And they would therefore be required to take their medicine or do whatever was necessary to make sure that they were properly taking care of themselves. That we no longer, as somebody mentioned, they have rights. I think Abby mentioned the term of having their rights, and they have civil liberties, as does everybody else. And therefore, as long as, somebody mentioned, as long as they're not a harm to themselves or others, they're allowed to be free and independent, which gives them the option to sleep under the bridge and not to choose to take their medicine and not to choose to go to a shelter or something else. If they go into a shelter, then they would be considered housed. So I would argue that the question gets back to what other people have been talking about over and over again about preconditions. I would argue that the mental health issue, the person needs to be willing to accept the mental health treatment for whatever their particular issue is before they're housed. And that should be part of the deal.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Hands for our speaker. Just to say thank you especially for referencing the email and promotion for this debate and some of the things. And thank you for giving your own perspective on how you would define homelessness. That helps us to understand your speech. So I appreciate that. And I'm going to go to a question from Ilona Clark. Ilona, you can unmute and ask your question to me.
Hi. I just was wondering of the previous speaker. I think definitions are very important too, and it seems to me like there's almost a continuum. There's the way it was presented was there's the housed and there's the unhoused, but I'm wondering what the speaker thinks of people who are sort of couch surfing place to place to place, don't actually have an address where they can get, say, welfare checks or where assistance that they may need in terms of mental health can actually find them. They have a roof over their head or many roofs, one after the other. Technically speaking, they're housed according to the speaker's definition.
Okay.
But
right.
Would they be considered homeless or housed in his opinion?
Thank you. 1 minute to answer.
The person sleeping on the sofa is considered underhoused. These are formal definitions that are used within the industry of housing affordability. And yes, there is a huge continuum between the true homeless, the underhoused, and then you go all the way up to somebody, for example, who's kind of at the top end of that spectrum, who is working to establish themselves, say, in a habitat house where they become a homeowner. So there's a whole spectrum of things.
Thank you. And I'll take one more question from Miguel. You can unmute and ask your question to me.
Yes. So when I have this question for you, it's about, so when you say homeless people who is living in couches or in the dining room, or stay in the dining room, is not homeless or not being considered homeless. In San Francisco, we have this definition. We amplify the definition because, for example, we have families with domestic violence, and the families, and we have a long list, the waiting list for families to go into a shelter. So when these families suffer domestic violence, they're looking, they need a place, a safety place where they need to stay, to stay in temporarily. So,
okay, I'm going to consider that to be a question. So, Richard, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, my part of my.
I don't want to say all, but most of the situations that I've been involved, counties and towns, have some either relationship with a battered women's shelter or equivalent to deal with domestic abuse. So there clearly that is one of the many programs. I mean, there are many slices and dices. There's veterans housing, and there's senior housing, and it goes on and on and on. But domestic abuse shelters are a very common partial solution to housing.
All right, thank you. And with that, the speaker is thanked. All right, we are moving to a speech and I'm just looking at where I'm at, a speech in the affirmative. Michael Abramson in Santa Clara, are you ready to speak? I'm going to give you 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. I live in Silicon Valley. This is where Google and Facebook are. And to our shame, here in one of the richest places in the world, thousands of people don't have a roof over their heads. For many years, we created many more jobs than homes for people who would take these jobs. And this huge jobs housing imbalance will keep generating homelessness as long as it exists. And I am very sympathetic with what Deborah Morrison was telling about this, and I don't need to repeat all this. And some cities in our area are beginning to recognize that this is the structural problem, and we are now building more homes than probably ever before. The voters approved Measure A that provided funding for building deeply affordable housing, but it will still take years or even decades to make a dent. So the question is how to help people who live on the streets right now. In my Santa Clara County, we have a nonprofit destination home which adopted the housing first approach to addressing homelessness. The main idea is that at the end of the day, any solutions should start from a safe, stable, and affordable home. They should not end here, but they should start here. And this approach works. For instance, 96% of clients of the permanent supportive housing program have remained stably housed for more than a year. So let me repeat this number, 96%. And this is of those with the highest barriers to obtaining and maintaining housing. Note that we don't always need big and expensive homes. For instance, the project Home Key is using for transitional housing very cheap modules that can be quickly moved to any suitable location and deployed there. And each of these modules includes several units. They are small, but every family has its own and can enjoy the privacy of their home while they're waiting for permanent housing. So we can solve the problem of the homelessness that we created. What is lacking is a political will and organization, but this is beginning to change. Different municipalities can learn from each other and use what works best. We have to do this. We have to help people who live and work in our cities to have decent homes and life quality.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll take one question this round for each speaker. And Eric, you can unmute and ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would the speaker include a relaxation of some of the stringency of building codes as one of the elements to assist in ending homelessness?
Thank you. 1 minute.
Definitely, it would end the root cause. It would help at least with addressing root cause of the homelessness. And I just yesterday talked to one of developers, small developers in Mountain View, and he said that it takes more than 3 years to approve the project with 9 units. It's just ridiculous. The construction takes a year, but getting through all approvals takes more than. We have to change it. It just it's not sustainable. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And with that, the speaker is thanked. Hands for our speaker. All right. We're going to speech in the negative to Pam Morris. Pam, you have 3 minutes. Looking for Pam?
Yep, there we go.
Okay.
I'm unmuted.
All right. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. I live 20 minutes north of Berkeley, which is an epicenter for the absolute squalor and failure of any homeless policies. Billions of dollars have been spent here, and it is an absolute travesty. And in my opinion, I've watched quite a few documentaries to try to become educated. I've watched many interviews with homeless people to try to understand what's going on. And what I've sort of learned and come up with is that homelessness can't be dealt with as a big lump. The reason people are homeless has to be addressed first. Like when you go to a restaurant, you don't put blue cheese on your ice cream. You have blue cheese on your salad at the beginning of your meal, and then you have your ice cream for dessert. We've mixed everybody together like we're putting blue cheese on our ice cream. And I could be homeless. I could be 3 payments away from my mortgage. We all could be homeless. We could have medical bills. So there are financial refugees that are a lot of the homeless problem. And that can be solved with housing and retraining. But there's also other kinds of homeless that need more social work than just retraining and a house. There are people that are escaping from domestic violence. There are runaway children. There are people that are out of prison. There are alcoholics. There are people that are drug addicted and mentally ill. We've spoken about those. And free housing, in my opinion, is like a hospital, or should be like a hospital. Go there to feel normal and be able to get a job, get training, and then move on to your own place. And before the ADU law got passed in California, accessory dwelling unit, there really wasn't a place to go. But now there will be a more affordable house. Do I want somebody on drugs just out of prison or mentally ill in my backyard in an ADU? No. But would I take somebody who lost their job and needed training and needed a place that would be clean and dry and they could take a shower and get back on their feet? Yes. When someone is on drugs, they need intervention. In my opinion, they need forced rehabilitation. I'm not saying they need to be institutionalized, but they need forced rehabilitation and ongoing support. They cannot continue to be on drugs, living in the squalor in the streets, because they will be a health hazard and a psychic hazard to the community and to themselves. And the idea that they have rights and that allows them to be on the street in these squalid positions, that's not kindness. That's not the meaning of rights.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hands for our speaker.
I ran
Thank
out
you.
of time.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll have one follow-up question if somebody wants to raise your hand and ask a question. Okay, I'm going to ask a question. Pam, could you elaborate a little bit more on your speech?
Yeah, I feel like I sort of didn't finish.
You go ahead. Give it 1 more minute. There you go.
Okay, real quick. I think everyone deserves to be clean and have a bed, have a shower and a bed, but it might be a dormitory style. And the people that can go back to work, they might need the hospital housing where they have a home for a transitional time. And there needs to be retraining. And the people that are never going to recover, that are so damaged from drugs or from mental illness that they'll never be okay, they need group housing where they can support each other and they can have a support group and social work. So there's very, very different needs. And billions of dollars have been thrown at this problem in California, and it's not being solved. Partly, there's a lot of corruption in the problem and not very much money in the solution. The money is in the problem with the building and the construction. But what we need is we need to separate the problems so that they can be solved. You can concentrate. Okay, everybody that is in drugs, they need drug therapy, they need drug rehabilitation. Don't mix everybody up just because they're homeless.
Thank you. And I'll consider my question to have been the question. So the speaker is thanked. You guys got to be fast there. Got to be fast with your questions. All right, we're moving to a speech in the affirmative. Catherine Anderson. Catherine, you have 3 minutes.
Madam Chair, I'm Catherine Anderson, and I have been homeless 20 years ago, right after 9/11. I spent the winter homeless voluntarily. I was a Dean's List student who walked away from a dangerous situation. I had some substance abuse issues, and I used that homeless period in my life as my spirit walk, and I got sober during that time. I met those people who consider homelessness a choice. They choose that lifestyle as a lifestyle choice. There was a gentleman who was making more money than he could as a disabled, injured football player, and he was making money panhandling to send to his mother. So we're going to take all that off the table. What it's like out there is you are in survival mode. All you're thinking about is, where am I going to use the bathroom? Where am I going to sleep at night? Is somebody going to kill or rape me if I'm asleep? It's that fight, flight, and fawn survival mode. There's not much outside of that. If I'm hungry, where am I going to eat? Shelters are temporary at best. If you do get a bed, you have to be out at 7 o'clock in the morning. And when it's 30 degrees outside, I'm from Seattle as well. When it's 30 degrees or colder outside, you're back into that. How am I going to stay warm? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? The other thing is, and I speak about the bathroom. Imagine if you got up in the morning and didn't know where you were going to take care of your basic bodily functions, much less wash your hands. The other part that I see about providing shelter is you take all that trauma inducing. We're inducing trauma with this kind of stuff. They don't have a place to put their waste, physical bodily waste, physical waste. Say that you get a hamburger, you get that gift card that we talked about earlier, and you have that packaging. Where are you supposed to put that? All the dumpsters are locked. Now we have trash all over the streets. How much cardboard do I need to gather in the day so that I don't have to contact the cement because it's cold? That's that survival place that people are living in. And if you give them shelter, that fight, flight, and fawn starts to taper down. And then there's the next set of needs comes up for that person. They're not in pure survival mode where that's all you can think about. I got sober on the streets. I met a bunch of wonderful people who are homeless people. Met a bunch of sober people who were homeless. I met people who chose to be homeless. I also met the other ones that we've talked about where we have some mental illness. We have some trauma. So these people need homes.
All right, hands for our speaker, and cheers to you for getting sober. Way to go.
Thank you. It's
awesome.
Right.
It's so awesome. One question that's coming from Gretchen. Gretchen, you're unmuted, but I cannot hear you. Try again.
Is that better?
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question for the speaker is, what would constitute, if you will, if a city wanted to build a lot of housing for as many people to get them off the street as possible, what's sort of the minimum unit of housing? What does that need to look like If you're trying, as you described, to just move someone from that very bad insecurity to a place where they at least can reliably take care of their trash and have a shower.
1 minute
Right,
to answer.
Thank you. That really is what it is. In my community where I live now in Suquamish, Washington, they've built tiny houses. And it really is just that space where they can rest, but they have facilities where they have running water, they have restrooms, they have a dumpster for the community. It doesn't have to be a high rise, somebody used the word ghetto earlier. It doesn't have to be that. It just needs to be a consistent place where a person can lay their head, somewhere where they can take care of their bodily needs. Just the very basics is way further than where we're at right now.
All right, thank you. And with that, speaker is thanked. Hands for our speaker. All right. Our next speaker is Kevin Dahlgren. Kevin, you have 3 minutes.
Hi all, nice to see you all. I love that we're all here for the same reasons. We all believe in the cause. My name is Kevin Dahlgren. I've worked in homeless services for over 20 years, primarily in Portland, Oregon Metro. I've been to thousands and thousands of camps, worked with thousands of homeless. And what I wanted to share is, we all often hear housing ends homelessness. And while that sounds good on paper, the biggest challenge I've had and a lot of my colleagues have had in our career is getting people to accept that housing. And even if we're being as flexible as possible with every type of housing, what the last speaker said is, unfortunately, a lot of people get comfortable on the streets and then end up choosing a lifestyle, which makes our job 10 times harder. We're all very motivated to get every individual off the streets because this is a true humanitarian crisis. And what I argue is that while we could easily afford, for all the money we waste, if we put it all towards housing, we could afford this. But what we also need is to invest in good outreach teams that know how to work with the homeless and build that trust again, bring back hope, and help them transition back off the streets. And that is key, because just building the housing without wraparound care or preparing for the housing, you're going to get a lot of no's and a lot of resistance. And that's the challenge. And what I would argue, having worked in the system for a couple decades now, is that what once was a cause has become a multi-million-dollar industry. And a big part of that industry is to keep people comfortable on the streets because they don't know how other ways to solve it. But unfortunately, we've created almost this population of dependents who now rely on us to take care of them. And it's not all the homeless, it's just a percentage of the homeless. And what I'm saying is that it's not helping them, it's hurting them. We have to empower these individuals, not enable them. Bring back the, establish trust, bring back the hope. That is key to getting people off the streets and being successful off the streets. And that means retention. That means solid, true wraparound care. Mental health. I'm a drug and alcohol counselor, and my clients, 80% of the time have a history of addiction, mental illness, childhood trauma, physical health issues, family estrangement, a lot of complex reasons. And that's the key. The housing first model only works if we also have the system in place to help them with all their barriers. And that, unfortunately, isn't always the case. More often than not, they get shoved in the house. So the ones that accept housing go to housing, but don't really get the support they need. They burn out of the housing. Now it's 10 times harder to get them to new housing because of the eviction or something. And so that's very frustrating part of my job. And so part of my intensive street outreach is preparing people to transition off the streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Hands for our speaker. And I'll take one question. And let's see, it looks like Deborah was first. So Deborah, you can unmute, ask your question to me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if the speaker could elaborate a little bit more on what are some of the reasons that he has heard people tell him about why they're not accepting housing. I assume that sometimes people give a reason for saying no.
Yeah,
I
1 minute.
wonder what those are.
Well, that is a very complex question and I need 20 minutes, but in 1 minute, I would say, to summarize, there's a strong mistrust in the system. A lot of homeless don't like us, don't trust us because they've given up. And if they don't trust us, they're not going to accept the help because they think we're going to drop the ball again. We've lost the funding. We don't answer the phones. It goes to voicemail. What we need to do is build back that trust, because once trust is returned, hope returns. So while we could go on and on with the reasons, that is one of the biggest reasons is an untrusting system. Is the fact is we have let them down, right? We got to get better at this. And that's the issue. Duplication of services. And again, you know, if we have a hard time navigating the system, for anyone here who's like social workers, if we're frustrated, imagine what they're going through. We're like, why won't they call me back? Oh my God. If we're feeling this way, what are they feeling? So that's the basic answer, is there's a strong mistrust in the system. So of course they're saying no, because they don't believe that we could actually help them.
All right, with that, the speaker is thanked. Hands for our speaker. All right, we have several more people that want to speak. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to 2-minute speeches on the topic. You can speak for or against the resolution, or you can just give really good information that you think will be another piece of this puzzle. And so it'll be 2 minutes each. And I wonder if, let's see, Stuart G., if you would like to give a 2-minute speech.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Stuart Gill, and I live in Morgan Hill, California, about an hour south of San Francisco. So we understand homelessness in this area. I think a lot of what I want to say builds on some of the things that Pam said earlier. And I'd like to connect the conversation that we've been having tonight with a program in our community. We started out talking earlier about Maslow's hierarchy of need, and housing is one of those. So food, shelter, employment are the things that we really need to be focusing on. This is clearly a multidimensional, very complex issue. And what I wanted to introduce, though, is a proactive program that we have in our community that helps people before they become homeless. And it's called the Safe Park program. And I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but we have a local church that offers some space for people to come and park when they've lost their home, when they're financially at the brink of going into homelessness, but they still have a car. And the purpose of the program is to help them stabilize, come there, park. I'm part of a social action committee. We bring them food. There is a multi-faith organization that provides food to these people in the evening. And then social workers help them find housing. And that's the common denominator that I've heard throughout this whole conversation, is housing. So I'm looking at this from an input and output, and it's complex. There are a lot of issues with people who are already homeless, but this program helps prevent people from becoming homeless. And as the executive director of one of our local social services agencies just told us, is that when somebody goes from being in their car to true homelessness, it's a real drop-off. So the opportunity is to help people who have just unfortunate situations at the time, that get them reestablished into at least some housing, and therefore they can find employment from there. So I just wanted to offer that up because I think that there are so many aspects of this issue that I would suggest that we need to segment them. And I think this is somewhat of what Pam Morse was saying earlier, but segment them and address them. They need to be addressed differently. But this is something that we can look at proactively.
And with that, the speaker is thanked. Hands for our speaker. Next up, I'm going to call on Rita Chisholm. Rita, would you like to speak for 2 minutes?
I'll try to make it 2 minutes. No, I'll listen for the beeper. No, I really have a lot of things that are going on in my mind, and I have agreement with everybody here. I think that all of us would agree that very few would not agree that we don't want to see something done to help people that need help. I just want to offer some of these thoughts and just get some feedback if anybody has any. One of the things that I do want to start with is by saying that when I was growing up, and I think most of us can actually relate to this, as I began to get older, I began to realize that not everybody believed everything that I believed. Not everybody was raised the same way I was. And when I would see like, well, why do they do that? Why can they get away with that? Whatever. That's where I began to understand that everybody lives very different lives from one another. So with that, I want to just some thoughts. Things often are good in theory, but not necessarily in practice. I think we all know what we're talking about. We want housing, but what we want in theory is not necessarily how it's going to work in practice. Another thing that was brought up was the fact that people that are on the streets are very accustomed, and that doesn't mean that they should not be helped, but we have to understand what we're fighting against. Just like a previous speaker spoke about how he did not like having his freedom, impinged upon. They're accustomed to making their own decisions. That is one thing about being out on the street. You don't answer to many people. And that is something that you can get accustomed to. Another thing is drug addiction and mental health issues. We can all talk about that. I think we know about these issues, but I want to ask, I'll quickly finish. I want to say that living with someone who is drug addicted or has mental health issues is very different than knowing about the issue. And I can attest that, thank God, I have not had any adverse effects, but I have lived with both of those things. And no, it's a very complex issue. And living next door to someone like that in a altogether living experience, that is the same as living in a family with that, because they have to deal with it. It has to be dealt with. So.
Thank you very much. And Rita, I'm going to give you 1 point for calling back other things that you have heard people say. That's really interactive, and I like that. And I'm going to give you 1 point for having your Hold America Together sign from Braver Angels. So with that, speaker is thanked. All right, next up, I'd like to call on Stacy Redinger. Stacy, would you like to speak for 2 minutes?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, gosh, wonderful conversation this evening. I'm here in San Diego. I'm the board president for a nonprofit called Homemade San Diego. We're one of 19 chapters around the country. We really do strive to help homeless service providers with either transitional shelters, supportive housing, and just from hearing across all of our chapters in the country, it is a very difficult nut to crack, whether it comes to permitting and getting through all the red tape. I mean, even just regular developers deal with it, but we're really hoping to see from across the country, maybe people here on this call, just stepping forward and getting in the arena in your cities and counties and pushing for some type of, what we'd like to see is some type of caveat that gets placed for those that are trying to build these housing environments. Right now, we see a lot of hotels that are being refurbished into locations, retail spaces that are being refurbished into multi-unit places. And most of what we are seeing is a lot of the move towards that wraparound service support, putting people into housing without providing all of that wraparound support. What we've at least noticed from a lot of our research is that it is not working. But again, we actually have to make sure, we're talking a lot about the homeless individual themselves. We also have to make sure those service providers are well taken care of as well. Because if we're expecting for them to carry a brunt of it, which means that they're looking for grants and fundraising and maybe getting some government funding, we really do all have to come together. I don't know if this could be a federal level push, but maybe just start at the grassroots. But we are going to be pushing even harder to try to get changes to permitting, to all of the aspects of making this a priority. Tons of government people say it's a priority. Our governor here in California says it is, but we've got to actually make it a true priority and by putting actions behind our words. So I really, really hope everyone on the call takes that movement forward. And I do want to just point out, I thought Pam and Kevin were very well thought through conversation points, and I agree with all of what you're saying. This cannot be a cookie cutter solution. We have to do that for everybody. Has to have like a different route to being taken care of. Thank you.
And with that, the speaker is thanked. Hands for our speaker. Next up, I'm going to call on Mary Marcella. Mary, would you like to speak for 2 minutes?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I might even be shorter than that because a lot of what I wanted to say has been said. My experience with homeless is seeing them on the streets of many cities, volunteering at shelters, seeing a family friend fall into drugs and homelessness. He is now in Oakland. Sometimes sometimes he's recovered, sometimes he's back on the street. So that hits the heart of, my childhood and friendship. I didn't grow up seeing a lot of homeless people, so I saw the difference over the years. I've seen it in Chicago where I've lived. I've seen it, I'm from Fresno, California. It's rampant there. If you take the Amtrak rail system called the San Joaquin, you will see homelessness all along those tracks. They say San Francisco is bad. I live in Richmond, California. It's bad. I've seen Portland. It's all over. As you all know, it is a big, huge problem in our country. There is not one solution for all. However, I think with the focus on housing and not giving up on that focus, we will get somewhere. It's messy. The only way we can get through this is to acknowledge that it's a hot mess. And the only way we're going to solve it is to face it. We want in America too often to have our problems solved quickly. We want them to go away. We don't like to feel comfortable. I'm sorry, this is uncomfortable to see someone on the street who should be housed. Just the other day, a woman with her dog on the side of the road. She's in a wheelchair. What can I do? I want to take her right now and give her a place to live. And, we have so many of these kinds of issues, and I feel powerless, and I don't want to feel powerless. I want to be part of the solution. And I want more people to want to be part of the solution. We need a major attitude shift in our country, and we need to be more compassionate towards each other. And we need to say, I don't care how long this is going to take. I don't care how much money it's going to take. It's worth it. Thank you.
That the speaker is thanked. We're going to do one more 1-minute speech from Roy Vela, and I'm sorry, 2-minute speech from Roy, and then we'll go to next steps. So be thinking about what you'd like to say about the next steps you think we should take. Roy, do you want to talk for 2 minutes?
Sure. Yeah. I came in fairly affirmative, but kind of on the line, and now I'm a bit negative, frankly. And I think part of what I'd like to add to the conversation is that we're talking about housing first as if that's a cause, and it's, as far as I can tell, especially from all the people who've spoken who work in this space, trying to deal with it day in, day out, it seems like the housing issue is more of an effect, right? The cause is something else. It's a lack of employment. It's a drug issue. It's a mental issue. There's some other societal breakdown that we are not providing that causes a person to end up on the street. And I lived in London for the last 12 years. I'm outside Boston now. And it's shocking to me how little we want to just take care of each other here. If there was a medical safety net, that would just change things dramatically. If there was a foundational training and education safety net, we have a lot of, I guess my thing is, this just seems like a byproduct. The fact that they're on the street and housing, that's not the root problem. The root problem is this other stuff that's causing the chaos that people are now out on the street. And that's a big, thorny, complex issue that I wish we had better answers to.
All right, thank you. With that, the speaker is thanked. This completes this round, and we're going to move to a short round of next steps. So I'm going to be now looking for people to give just 30 seconds to a minute of what do you think our next step should be. So we're looking for solutions. They can be very small, local solutions, policy solutions. And I'm going to take actually raised hands. And if I know Laurel, Solomon, and Richard were interested in saying something, Amy Richards was interested in saying something. If I see your hand, I'm going to call on those people that have already talked to the whips. But what do you think, just briefly, is a next step? I'm going to start with Laurel Finch. Go ahead and unmute and give us your next step.
Oh, I am unmuted. Okay. So next step, I see a really high need for some transitional options because like I did take in a homeless man this winter when it started snowing. I had seen him over a couple of months. He got caught losing housing and a job, and it was very hard. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a psychologist, but I couldn't leave him in the snow. So, and what I found is the shelters for single men, it was 57 years old. He was extremely undernourished and underweight. There was no place for him to go. There was a wait list of over 200, and he was on a wait list for metropolitan housing, but he missed one phone call, returned the call in 5 minutes, and he was off the list. So I was witnessing, it's hard to get a job without a car. It's hard to get a car without a job. You know, it was interesting to step in and witness what was happening, but he needed his basic needs first.
Thank you. And now I'm going to call on Richard Aberdeen. Richard, do you have a next step for us?
I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but in the last several presidential elections, the homeless issue is never asked in presidential debates. It doesn't come up. Not a single person in either party has ever mentioned homelessness. Joe Biden doesn't mention it. Donald Trump brought it up, but his solution was to bulldoze everybody off the sidewalks. But we need to push our politicians to start talking about it. That's my point. And I don't mean just our local. Bernie Sanders is the only person in all of the big shots in Washington who seems to have any heart at all for the homeless. He's the only person who talks about it. And to me, this man who says he's been in England, I think it was England you were in, or Europe somewhere, he sees how heartless we are here in this country. I don't mean you people that are here. I'm very encouraged by you, but how heartless, we are in this country as a whole towards people, no health care, people that are homeless. It's just terrible. And we need to start pushing our politicians who can actually do something about it.
Okay, thank you very much. Amy Richards, do you have a next step for us?
Yeah, I think it really builds on everything that Richard and Roy kind of got into about our culture more holistically. We're really talking about kind of the symptom and not the root of the problem. And I respect that we need solutions for people that are currently unhoused. I absolutely respect that. But I think we need to take this, 100 feet higher and look further back. At the end of the day, I see homelessness as a consequence of a society that lacks compassion and empathy, that doesn't see the fellow human and the person that's sitting right next to us on the street. And that's got cultural determinants that we need to start talking about. We need to start viewing individuals experiencing homelessness not as people with deficits only, but actually with assets too, that are capable of creating their own solutions if they're given the space and the opportunity and the voice. And so, I'm really happy to see several individuals on here that have had experience with homelessness, but we need more of you here, and we need to find ways to create space and create and carve out chairs at the table specifically for them.
Thank you. Julie Murray, you want to unmute and give us your next step?
Yes, thank you. I think that everything that people are talking about going to the root of the issue is extremely important. And we have to acknowledge that starting back in the very early 80s with Nancy Reagan's war on drugs and the criminalization of the use of drugs, rather than looking at what the profound illnesses and soul illnesses, dissatisfactions that led people into creating the culture of drugs that we're in now, is where somebody needs to take hold. But I'm one of those proponents of letting go of all of the illegal drug laws, legalize all drugs, and take all of the money that we continue to spend in criminalization and create excellent in-person residential rehab centers. That would house people.
Thank you. And Solomon, I know from the whips that you've been waiting to speak. Do you have a next step for us?
Yes, thank you so much, Madam Chair. So my bigger picture idea is that if you look back 150 years or so, LA, which is now a bustling city of 20 million in the greater LA region, used to be only 3,000 people. So I think maybe we should stop and think what the homelessness issue would have looked like in cities like LA some time ago and what kind of solutions may have been there. Maybe that will help us rethink a solution today. Another final point I have is that a spiritual perspective is missing. And I think monks should be a part of the conversation. You know, I come from India, land of Dalai Lama. And I think cities like LA do need people like Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu and people of that caliber who can really, give us the perspective that monks are also the ones who come with a begging bowl to each house, and they don't have the homeowners complaining on next door or calling the cops. I think there should be a perspective, a spiritual perspective as well, and a shift in thinking that can really help with the solution.
Thank you. I'll take one more next step before we go to our next thing. And Peter Dennis-Felser.
Felser, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. What a great discussion. This is so complex. I'm an architect. I was born and raised in Sacramento. Been practicing here for 40 years. I have been watching this explosion. And, Kevin mentioned a trust issue. And I think that's getting at the root cause of the issue. And for people who can't provide their basic dignity, for human dignity for themselves, we should do that. And for me, that would mean a basic sanitation, clean drinking water, and pick up their trash once a week. And what we're talking about is tent cities in that situation. We're surrounded by nonprofits and government organizations that will help people up if they want to. We're talking about people that don't want to, that can't be told what to do because it's an affront to their own self-esteem. So while we're providing basic dignity to the people that are currently on the streets, we need to be going upstream and squeeze that pipeline. And what I'm talking about is socializing our children so they're surrounded with role models so they have a great self-image. That's what's missing.
Okay, for all of these next steps that we've heard, I want you to give hands to everybody. I know there are more that I see your hands up there, but we're running out of time. We have a couple more things to do before we wrap up tonight that are really great. So just take a deep breath, let it out. We have done a lot of good work and learned a lot tonight. We're going to take a moment and we're going to ask you two questions at the same time. One is, tonight, what did you learn and what did you enjoy? You can say one or both. What did you learn or what do you enjoy? And this is not an opportunity to make a speech, but it's just to say, something you learned, something you enjoyed. And Chandler is going to open the chat so that you can chat this and put that in the chat. But I'll also call on a couple of people with raised hands to give voice to those, something you learned or something you enjoy, just really briefly. So the chat is open and you can start putting in the chat what you learned or what you enjoyed. And I'm going to just call on a couple of raised hands, and I will be looking for people I haven't heard speak yet. So if you didn't say anything at all this whole time, but you have something you learned or something you enjoyed, I'm going to be looking for your raised hand. Let's start with Rita.
I just want to say how thankful I am, but to hear from everyone, because sometimes when you hear someone say they're for something or against something, we take it at face value. But these conversations really help us to understand that there is a lot of critical thinking that is going into this issue. And it's not just, solely emotion based. And that's so important because emotions and the heart and the mind were intended to be used together. And that's what I'm just really thankful to hear from everyone and just really thankful for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Sheldon, what did you learn or enjoy?
Okay, get myself off mute here. So one of the really great things about the discussions tonight is, everybody's really passionate about the issue. I think we see it from different perspectives, and we have different ways in which we want to approach it. I think long term, I think everyone would want to see a sustainable and effective approach to dealing with homelessness that takes into consideration things like mental illness and other factors that might impede them from long-term success.
Thank you. Stacy, what did you learn or enjoy?
Yes, what I really appreciated was the diversity of voices that we had here this evening. And in particular, the share that was vulnerable enough in talking about her previous homeless experience. It opened my eyes to the fact I really think that there's a space there where we need to start doing better, deeper listening and understanding those different segments that have needs. So that was just wonderful, like an aha moment. And I really hope to be a part of some of these debates in the future.
Thank you. Richard, what did you learn or enjoy?
Talking to me, Richard Aberdeen?
I am Richard Aberdeen.
Because there's more than one Richard here. Okay. I just wanted to say I'm extremely encouraged because everybody here who spoke seems to really want to help the homeless. And it's something that's been in my heart for a long time. And I'm very, I wanted to say particularly to Laurel Finch, I think her name is, who actually took the homeless person into her home. That's God bless you. I hope that more of you do that too. Thank you.
All right. And I see lots of good comments in the chat. And also in the chat, no, chat is good. So what I want to do right now is I want to tell you that I'm a volunteer, and your debate staff tonight are a mix of volunteers and Braver Angels staff, and we love doing this. We spend a lot of time planning. We think really hard about the resolutions. We work really hard at it. And one of the reasons that this program is so good is that we take seriously the feedback that we get from you. Tonight or tomorrow, you'll get an email. So check your updates folder or whatever from us saying thanks for coming to the debate, and it will give you some links, and one of them is a feedback form. We take that really seriously. So if you have some ideas for us, something you want us to know, that has helped shape this program over the last couple of years of national online debates. So we definitely want to hear from you. If you're interested in volunteering and doing what we do, it's super fun with great people. One of them is Luke Nathan Phillips. And Luke, could you share for a minute just about why you do what you do and how we can be involved?
Sure thing. Well, real quick, full disclosure, Cynthia, I am not actually a volunteer at this moment. I know,
I did say and staff.
I'm a staff. I'm the kind of staff who mostly became a staff because I volunteered on so much stuff that eventually they figured it would be more productive to bring me on full time so I could do cool things like this 100% of the time with wonderful staff and volunteers, not unlike Cynthia and everybody else who is on this team tonight. So Cynthia, thank you for this, and thanks for a great job on all this. Everybody, you just were a part of a Braver Angels debate, something that I have taken to calling in my own head a chorus of the union, these kinds of moments where you have a huge variety of voices from a huge different number of experiences and understandings of the nature of reality and political principles and whatever, things that don't make sense together or shouldn't make sense together. But then when you bring it in the right spirit, when you have the conversation done with the right intentions to learn from each other and see what we can build together, then you get this beautiful thing where we have people from all kinds of experiences opening up a really fascinating conversation here. And this is the kind of thing that I think is just one of the things I absolutely love about Braver Angels and working for Braver Angels and having the opportunity to do many things with Braver Angels with all these wonderful people. So I just want to invite all of you on behalf of the volunteers and staff here and on behalf of the Braver Angels national community more broadly to join us as well. There should be a few links in the chat on ways that you can do that, one of which is to join us as a full-fledged Braver Angels member. One of the ways you can do that as well is become a member of the various volunteer staffs. The majority of the team that does Braver Angels debates are all volunteers, and there's a bunch of other different teams that put on forums and workshops and other things that we always need volunteers for. Or you can join your local alliances, of which there are many around the country. And if there aren't any near where you are, that is a great opportunity for you to set up one yourself and start bringing this work to people in your community around you. Aside from that, we are always looking for just more ways to reach out to people. The Braver Politics Initiative is coming up in a few weeks here, and that will be opening up a lot of ground. We're always in the middle of other fundraising campaigns. If you'd like to donate to us, then that's another way that you can participate. But whichever way you are interested in helping us out or being a part of this community, we are always looking for that, because this kind of work is something that really builds up from the ground up. So on behalf of our beloved community to yours, we invite you to join us in whatever way you think is best. And we look forward to seeing you at many future debates, workshops, forums, and maybe at a few national conventions moving forward. So with that, Cynthia, thanks for having done a great job. And thank you for having all of us here tonight.
Thank you, Luke. It is a pleasure to work with you. And I want to let everybody know that our next debate is Thursday, February 10th. And the resolution is resolved. Gender segregated youth programs should be protected by law. We're going to debate that. It's going to be super interesting and informative. Invite your friends. So again, thanks to our wonderful staff, the whips, Chandler handling the Zoom whip. Great job. Everything went super smoothly. All right, everybody, thanks for being here. Good night. We'll see you next time.